XML stands for Extensible Markup Language, and there's the X in XML. And it's a language that's shareable between different programs. For example, by now you're probably familiar with most of Microsoft's Office programs there that include Access, Excel. Well, there's other software writers out there creating their own programs like Corel. And what happens is that when you want to be able to share data or export it from Office into another program here, or Access, they have what's called a universal language, or language that actually strips down the information into its smallest, most meaningful parts. In fact, it doesn't contain any formatting. As you can see here, it says it actually describes only the content of the file, not the formatting. So when it comes to writing software programs, each different company has their own different coding, and when you try to share it, at least at the face value or on the surface, it can get really ugly. You can actually get, instead of some data, you can get a bunch of different symbols and characters that just mean nothing to us. So we need a clean way of being able to share data in between different programs from different software vendors. So that's what the Extensible Markup Language is being able to say, I want to share this with another software program, at least the data, strip it down, save it as an XML file, and within that XML file it actually uses tags or a set of rules. And those rules actually define the data within the file. For example, if you have a bunch of numbers that you saved into an XML file, what are those numbers? Because the data is stripped down, we need to know if the number is referring to his social security number, the total in sales that the employees made like in 2008. We can actually tag those and say this is for sales, or this is their social security numbers. And by tagging that data, then what we want to be able to do is have a structure to be able to pull that data in, and that's where the XML schemas come in. It's a separate file with a .xsd extension, and it's a set of rules that tells what kind of data or fields are and can be used in the XML file. So just the data itself in the XML file is fine, but when we want to, and I'll show you in just a minute, pull that data in from an XML file into our Excel workbook, then it needs to know the structure. It needs to know what data is going to be tied to what fields. So if I tagged it in the XML file that this field is their social security numbers, then I need to be able to have a set of rules that says this is a field for social security numbers, that you can go ahead and dump all that data into this field here. In fact, let me give you another visual aid. I'm going to go ahead and close out of my Word document here, go to my exercise folder. There's my customers XML file, an XML file, and then control-click on my schema file or XSD file. Now, if you can't see what are called extensions here, the XSD or the XML or the TXT and so on, then you want to watch my Windows Vista Level 1 training videos, because we talk about these extensions, how to show them, how to hide them, and also how to be careful that you don't delete them or overwrite them, otherwise your file probably won't open unless you come back and know what you're doing when it comes to these extensions. So I want to go ahead and open up both of them so you can see what I'm talking about in more detail. I'm going to go ahead and double click on my schema file, my XSD. Now when I double click on it, it opens up a notepad. When you double click on yours for the first time, it'll say, what program do you want to open this up with? You can go ahead and say Notepad, and then from there on out, it'll remember to open up your XSD files in Notepad. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on Customers, right click on Customers XML, and say I want to open with also Notepad, and left click on that. I'm going to close out of the folder here and drag these two notepads apart. Okay, like I was saying, is we have our XML file here. In the XML file we have all our data. You can see it's referring to the customers and their addresses. So we have the customer's name, Mr. Humphreys, and also Harry Potter. And we have their addresses, street, city, and state. Well, looking this at face value, you can see that we have the name, and everything in between those two, what they call tags, is the actual name of the person here. The difference between the name and the name here, the street and the street here, is that they have what's called an open tag, meaning that this is where the name starts after this tag. Then they have the / within this tag that says this is where it stops. So everything in between these two tags, the open tag and the closed tag, says that's going to be the person's name. So it defines this as the name. So I have all this data in here. We have all the names, we have all the streets, and so on. Now we have to create a separate file, an XSD file, that will actually map the data here into the fields that we define in here. Now when I talk about stripping it down to its smallest, most meaningful parts, it is because you could logically tell me, well, Kurt, look at this. That's the name field right there, isn't it? I mean, if it says name right here, why can't we just go ahead and import all this data, and it would just go ahead and, when we pull it into Excel, just have the column name, header, name, and have all the names listed below that. It doesn't work that way. It's really stripped. So we actually tag it in here by saying these are the names. Then when we want to import it into Excel, we say that we want to import all the names into the name field. And this is what the schema does. It defines those fields, okay? So now that we have both of these, let me go ahead and take it to the next level and actually first set up the structure in Excel, and the structure meaning that we're going to have name field, street field, city, state, and zip. So once you set up the structure in Excel and you have those fields and you actually drag those fields into the corresponding cells within the Excel workbook, then you can actually pull in the data, because once you have the field set up, the structure, the name field, the street field, then you can actually, boom, pull all the data in, all the names to the name field, all the streets to the street field, and so on. I'm going to go ahead and close out of both of these notepads, double click and open up the Excel. Next, I want to be able to come over here and click on the Developer tab, because that's where all the XML features are, the XML group. If you don't have this up in your ribbon here, by default Excel doesn't install it for you, so you'll have to come up here, click on the Office logo button, come down to the Excel options. In the Popular category, go ahead and check the box Show Developer tab in ribbon. Check it, click OK, and it'll be there. First of all, and you can see this little button here, the source, go ahead and click on it, and then come down here in the task pane and click on the XML maps. Now the whole point of this is saying, look, the XML maps is talking or referring to the schemas, and the schema is all about structure. What fields are we structuring for to later import the data into? Well, if I go ahead and click on Add, I want to go to my exercise folder because there's my schema, the structure here. When I double click on that, if I made the mistake, you can see right here the name of the schema, customer info. If I made the mistake, you can delete it, but I didn't, so I'll click OK. There are the fields right here, and all I have to do is go ahead and click on one of those fields in the task pane and drag it over here into, well, in this case, cell A1. Two things: once I dump it, there's the field name, IDs, so when I actually later import the data, it will dump all of the data from the XML file below this field here that's called ID. If it's actually tagged in the XML file, any numbers to the ID field, or as the ID. Then I can come over here, click on the name, drag that over here next to it. And the second thing that it does is that you'll notice it gives it color, and it's got a little blue tick mark. Well, if you watch my training video on tables, you'll know that it converted it into a table. That little blue tick mark defines it as everything to the left and above it as part of the table. Now, without going too much into detail or veering off the course here, it's important that you actually keep all these fields together in column format from left to right here. You don't want to put a field down here, or a field over here, or a field up there for two reasons. First of all, if you do, for example, let me go ahead and click on street, drag it down here, and then later decide, whoops, let me go ahead and select street, and then see if I can click on the border and perhaps drag it back up next to here. Click off in a blank area. Look at that. I have two little tick marks. That means that this is a table and this is a table. I have two separate tables. Well, when it comes to formatting, if I choose to change the table styles here up in my related contextual tab, table styles, see how when I hover over it and change the color here, it only applies to this right here because it sees that as a table separate from this? Well, first of all, when it comes to formatting, that's annoying. So I don't want to do that. Second of all, I don't want to have fields down here and going by row instead of by column, because if you decide to later on export your data here, you have to have all your XML mapped data be in a contiguous adjacent list from left to right with no column gaps. So it has to be from left to right. You can't have a gap and right click and insert here, no column gaps. So we want to keep it clean. I'm going to go ahead and select the range, hit the delete key on the keyboard to get rid of them, start over again. Since I want all of them, how about if I just go ahead and click on one, hold down the control key, and click on all the rest. So all of them are selected. Then just click and drag one of the many selected, come over here and dump into cell A1, brings them all in. And then click off in a blank area. You can see right there, there's the tick mark, and it's referring to all of these as all together into one table. So when I hover over it, it'll update. Click off in a blank area. Okay, so I have the structure set up thanks to the schema file. It says this is going to be when you're ready to import your data. All those fields are tagged with the IDs, all those fields with the name and street and so on. Okay. Now to import my data, come back up here, click on the Developer tab, and then just come up here and click on the Import XML Data button. It says, where's your XML data? Well, it's right here, customers. Double click on it and boom. All the data knows which fields, thanks to the structure of the XSD file, where to drop them. Anybody that's tagged with name in the XML file is going to be in the XML schema or data field here. And then street and city and state and zip code. Now let's see, what would happen if I come down here and I try to add somebody else? Let's do... The moment I start typing, notice what happens. It actually updates and drags the table down after I type in my first field here and hit the tab key. And then when I'm finished, I'll be sure to save my work here. Click on Save. Save my workbook to my exercise folder and say it my. Click Save. And then if I want to be able to export this, because I've updated it now as another XML file, because my first XML file only had the data range here from .wern to Harry Potter. Now that I've added another person here, I can go ahead and come up here in the XML group and click on Export. See, it's going to save it as an XML file, and I can call it, click Export, and I'm done. So if I close out of here, come back to my exercise folder, there's my customer update. If I right-click that and open it up with Notepad, should have everybody's data, including Don Juan's. So, by the same token, if I give this to somebody else here and I say, go ahead and import this into your Excel workbook, I also need to give them the schema here, the structure, whereupon they can actually take the fields, map them, and put them in Excel. And after they put it in Excel and map the fields to within the range, it could be A1 or starting in B1 and go all the way over to column E or F, then they can go ahead and pull in the data into those map fields. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel, get notified of the latest videos, and for only $2 a month, you can have access to all my Microsoft Office training videos.